What's up, Internet, and welcome back to the Engadget podcast. I'm Senior Editor Devindra Hardwar. This week I'm joined by Senior Writer Sam Rutherford. Hey, Sam.
Hey, how's it going?
Going okay. And also podcast producer Ben Elman is here. Hey, Ben.
A case of food poisoning couldn't keep me from talking about the Switch 2.
Don't eat old cream, people. That's the message from Ben and to all the kids out there. This week, it's the Switch 2. What else is it? It's the thing that we have been planning for and expecting to hear so much about. Sam had some hands-on time with it at a Nintendo event. We have live blogged it. We have all the details of this thing too, so I'm excited to talk about it. But also, it's really expensive, and we're going to kind of talk about why that is. And hey, coincidentally, the Trump administration also announced new sweeping global tariffs that will make everything more expensive, and I think it's all kind of related. And yeah, stay tuned to the end of this episode too, folks. I have a chat with the creator of Cowboy Bebop, Shinichiro Watanabe, about his new show Lazarus. That was a really cool experience to be able to talk to this guy who is like he is like a creative genius. He is one of the people I think is just like a true genius in the world, and like his work, Cowboy Bebop especially, has really influenced me. So check out our chat. And Lazarus is all right. I'll talk more about that later. It's not as good as Cowboy Bebop, but hey, we got to talk to Shinichiro, so that was great. As always, folks, if you're enjoying the show, please be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice. Leave us a review on iTunes and drop us an email at podcast@engadget.com. We also typically live stream around 11 a.m. Eastern on Thursdays. Maybe we'll start doing that earlier. We'll see. But you can see us talk about, maybe we'll have devices on hand. We talk with the audience. It's a fun time. Join us. So the Switch 2 is kind of officially here. We got a glimpse of it in January, right? But now we know what it is. It is a device with a 7.9-inch, 120 hertz, 1080p LCD screen. The screen can do HDR now. That alone is like such a massive upgrade over the original Switch and also over the Switch OLED. It is $450. It's coming June 5th. Pre-orders are opening on April 9th, including some new games like Mario Kart World, which is this beautiful,
It's so
beautiful
good.
like open world Mario Kart with up to 24 players. There's a new Donkey Kong platformer. It's called Bonanza. We've seen a whole bunch of things. Sam, you actually got to touch this thing. You got to play
hmm
some games. What are your first impressions of the Switch 2?
Yeah. So I mean, let's kind of start off with hardware and design. It is kind of what you think it is. I kind of in my head I think about it as like the Super Switch because
Yeah,
it's got
yeah.
the same basic layout, the same basic design, had the detachable Joy Cons, it's got a kickstand, and so it's very familiar. And I think there's a good reason Nintendo didn't try to mess with the formula too much. They didn't need to. Um, and but it is a little bit bigger. It has a larger screen. It's not OLED, and I actually am not really that upset about it
Right.
because the new screen is really good. It does HDR, does 120 hertz refresh rate with VRR, and so look, it doesn't have like the super deep blacks that you get with an OLED screen, but it still looks really good,
Mm.
and it doesn't feel that much bigger. Yeah, it's about a little bit about maybe an inch and a half wider and about half an inch taller, but it definitely doesn't feel bulky. And they've done some like little design tweaks, like it has tapered sides to make sure that it
Mhm.
still feels really sleek and it's not really that much heavier either. And so it's not like the original Switch was like you could put it in your pocket anyways. You still need a bag to carry it around, and that's going to be the same case for this
You
thing.
could kind of put it like I put the original Switch in a lot of pockets back in
Yeah,
the
if you got like massive cargo shorts, maybe okay, but
Hey, the
I think
massive cargo shorts are coming back.
they're
I know
coming
it's
back.
weird, but
They're so
yeah,
useful. Like you want to be able to hold a Steam Deck or something. Um, the way you
Okay, but
described it,
let's talk about
Mhm.
OLED and the lack of OLED for a second
Well,
because
it
I was
kind of goes back to what we were
so
talking
sure
about.
that the
No.
Switch OLED was manufacturing
Mhm.
practice for the Switch 2 to be
It does.
OLED standard.
It doesn't have to be OLED. Like this is exactly what I was talking about with the iPhone 16e. Is that Apple made that extra expense to put OLED in a pretty basic phone when you could do pretty good with LCD these days. You can get
hmm
high refresh rates and HDR, and those are the things that really pop to your eyes and really matter. This is also Nintendo, a company that will love to resell you another Switch 2 in a couple of years, except it's slightly better. So yeah,
yeah.
we'll
So
get an OLED version in a couple of years for sure, right?
yeah, I really feel like Nintendo is
Mhm.
leaving that possibility open. But at the event that I was at yesterday, there was also a developer Q&A with some of the like hardware people in charge at Nintendo, and they basically said what Devindra, what you just mentioned, is that LCDs have come a long
Yeah.
ways in the last few years, and like they specifically mentioned that the OLED Switch doesn't support HDR, but the Switch 2 does, even
Yeah.
though it's an LCD and not an OLED. And so it's always like when you're talking about like figuring out your bill of materials and what specific components are going into a device, there's always going to be some compromises. And I think they wanted something that maybe had a little bit more brightness to it, probably a little bit more affordable, although we're not necessarily seeing that in the actual price of the Switch 2. But I think, and this is kind of why, like, a lot of people were expecting it off of
Mhm.
coming from the OLED Switch, but after seeing it in person, I am not bothered at all.
I'm not surprised too. And it's really the things that make a big difference are it's basically it is HDR because HDR adds that extra level of brightness.
Hmm.
I'm playing on a 4K PC monitor right now, and my eyes can tell like, oh no, I'm playing Assassin's Creed Shadows and it didn't flip on HDR. You flip on HDR, the kind of grayscale ness of the blacks go away and it just becomes this really sharp contrasty thing. Your eyes really respond to that really well. So I'm not at all surprised by the screen. Is there anything else like as you describe it, Sam? You
Hmm.
describe basically a slightly better Switch. Like it is a
I
bigger
mean,
screen.
for all intents and purposes, that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
Now there are a couple of like more niche upgrades. Like for example, the Switch 2 only supports micro SD Express cards now. You
Mhm.
can't use your old Switch cards, and the downside of that is micro SD Express cards are a little bit more expensive, but they are significantly faster. We're talking about
Yes.
5x, maybe 10x
Yeah.
speeds. Nintendo hasn't released the exact read write speeds for the Switch 2 yet, but that should make a huge improvement for like download speeds and loading times when you're booting up a game. And so
Mhm.
I'm actually think that's a positive, even though yes, it does add a little bit of the cost to like aftermarket accessories.
These
Was a
games will have better
standard Switch
textures.
also didn't it also support XD Express? It just wasn't
No, what do you mean? I'm pretty sure that it just didn't at all. Remember the original Switch came out in 2017.
Yeah.
SD Express was like barely even a thing, or not even a thing back then. So
Yeah. So these new games will likely have bigger textures because they are running at 1080p. They can also scale to 4K. I don't think they're stuffing in like full size 4K textures in this, but there's
mhm,
probably a lot of upscaling going on. But even 1080p, like full 1080p, Switch games were not running that
yep.
on the device, even when it was docked. So they maybe didn't always have those size textures. That totally makes sense. I almost wonder if Nintendo wants to start selling its own SD cards and just making some of that Sony money of just overpriced accessories. I don't know, but at the very
I
least,
hope not
yeah.
because I still think that Sony's proprietary memory cards is what killed the Vita and the
It absolutely
PSP.
did because that's Sony, but it doesn't have to be proprietary, right? They could just be like, "Hey, we're Nintendo and we are producing these SD cards, and you can buy these and be sure they work with your Switch 2,
Yeah,
or
I
you
mean,
can buy
if
them."
they want to make their
Yeah,
own like Nintendo branded like memory cards, fine, go ahead. But like you can still get your SanDisks, your Lexars, your I think
mhm,
Samsung. I haven't seen any micro XD Express cards on the market just yet, although they announced it like 2 years ago. But you can better be sure that there's going to be a lot more choices coming on the market real soon, especially when the Switch 2 launches on June
mhm.
5th, because we did get that official release date.
That's good. But going back to like what it's improving, even the Joy Cons, I hated the Joy-Con rails. I think within a couple of months of owning the first Switch, like the Switch fell on the floor at one point, and the rails like lost the
Oh,
like
oh my
rail
God, they're
tension
so much
altogether.
better.
That's terrible. So now the Joy-Cons magnetically attach. The
Mhm.
Joy-Cons also seem a little more ergonomic. They said they made the thumbsticks better. Did they feel
The
better, do you
thumbsticks are
think?
a little bit bigger.
Mhm.
The buttons on the left Joy-Con are a little bit bigger too. They're kind of trying to mimic, that traditional D-pad by making it a little bit bigger.
Right.
It's not quite there yet, but hey, I'll definitely take bigger face buttons. Um, and there's the detachment button on the back of the system is bigger too, and so you just press it and you pull straight away. There's no kind of like
Nice.
lifting up and down to attach it, and it just makes it so much better. And I think it feels a little bit more secure too. And
I'm
because like
sure.
it's magnetic, it should I hopefully wear better over time.
I think editor in chief of Engadget, Aaron Support, is pointing out like the thunk of putting on the Joy Cons is good, and I love a good thunk on any
Mhm.
device.
That magnetic like suction feeling is
Yeah.
like very like reassuring. Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to point out is like this thing seems like it's decently powerful. Nintendo has not given us full details yet, but they're saying it's a 120 hertz screen. They are saying some games can run at a 1080p 120 FPS, which is going to look super smooth for really fast paced games. But also, when you dock it to your TV, the actual dock has a fan in it now too, so they can crank the GPU cores a little higher, run the device a little hotter. And they're saying some games will reach 4K 60 FPS, which is wild to me because that's something not even the PlayStation 5 can do consistently. So that's just the whole thing. Then
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
the pricing. This thing is $450, which is the exact same price as the PS5 right now, the current digital model of the Slim. Also, the PS5 has been on sale forever for $400 with Astrobot. So this thing costs more than the PlayStation 5. It's not nearly as powerful as that. Just give it shouldn't be anyway, but we need to see all the details.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
do you feel about the pricing, Sam? Because I've been thinking about this. I wrote a piece about it yesterday, where I actually think I think the price is justified. But what are your first impressions there?
If you had asked me before the event, I would have put money that the Switch 2 was going to cost $400.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so to see that 450 price tag was a bit of a surprise. And I think, like you said before, I think we're going to touch on this later. I think Nintendo might be kind of factoring tariffs and, future cost of production into some of that. And that's part of why the Switch 2 is feeling a little bit more expensive than a lot of people, and there's definitely some like serious sticker shock. So actually, as we're recording right now, Nintendo is running like a treehouse and showing off some more gameplay from some of the new Switch 2 games, and literally every single comment in the live chat is drop the price, because not only is the Switch 2 $150 more expensive than the original Switch was at launch.
Yep.
The games cost more, and the accessories, a lot of the important accessories like the Pro Controller and extra pairs of Joy Cons cost more. So the Pro Controller and the Joy Cons are, let me double check to
Hmm.
make sure I got it right. Um, yeah, the Pro Controller is $80 and a pair of Joy Cons is $90, and those are both
Wow.
$10 more
Yeah.
than what the equivalent was for the Switch. Um, and depending on the games, you're looking at 70, 80, or $90 for the physical version of, like, for example, Mario Kart World is going to be
Marco World at
$90 for the
90?
physical cart.
Oh man. Yeah, I saw the $80 price and I was like, that seems high. I didn't realize
Hmm.
even the physical gets more expensive. That stuff is like I can't really excuse. The game development costs a lot of money. Game prices have skyrocketed also over the last couple of years. But the console itself, like putting this thing in perspective, the Switch basically inspired the Steam Deck and this whole slew of like gaming PC portables we've seen. And from just the way the games seem to be running and the specs they're saying, this seems a lot more powerful than the base Steam Deck, which is $400, which with a much smaller screen, a worse screen, it doesn't have HDR. It's also like not great build. Steam Deck is a big, massive thing. This is a much slimmer device. You've got better games. You've got
Yeah,
like
it's definitely sleeker than the Steam Deck.
and just the Joy-Con too. Like you can't take those Steam Deck controllers off. And any other PC like the I think the Lenovo ones, right? They have removable joysticks.
Hmm.
Anytime I've tried that on any other PC gaming handheld, they just can't quite get it right because they don't understand controllers. I don't think the original Switch Joy-Cons were perfect, but these seem just a little better, a little more ergonomic. So
Oh, definitely.
yeah. And given
Uh,
So
everything is more expensive too. Like let me just say this: the GPUs. I'm not justifying this. I'm just saying like everything's more expensive because it takes a lot more manufacturing process and power and funds to actually put in powerful chips and things. The Nvidia mid-range cards are now starting at $550. People are spending a lot more for GPUs, so everything is more expensive. Plus, you tack on the tariffs that I think Nintendo was expecting. But
yeah,
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 go ahead, Ben.
we've also been through like a global
Yes.
inflationary event. Like
yeah.
the
I was about
original
to say that.
Switch
Yep.
was released in 2017 when we were blissfully aware of COVID-19 because it 19 is for 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Um,
been the better part of a decade since we've had a new Nintendo system.
Yeah.
exactly. So Ruindig in the chat asks, what is the price up from the Switch 1 in USD? I believe the original
150.
price for the
Yeah.
Switch was 300.
Yep, it's
Yes.
up 150
And so
from
it's
the
up
original.
150. So between inflation and then also just like manufacturing costs, the fact that GPUs are more expensive, it starts to make a bit more sense.
Yeah. So when I wrote about it, I was basically asking, is the Nintendo Switch 2 too expensive? And I don't think I think it's like justifiably expensive given everything Nintendo put in there. I'm not like saying, hey, I wish everything were more expensive. It's just kind of a sad economic reality of where we are.
Hmm.
It's going to be tougher for people to buy. That's a whole thing. Who knows? Like, even if it was Nintendo anticipating these tariffs, will the price get even higher down the line too? Because as we saw, what during the pandemic, Sony was like, "Oh man, these PlayStation 5s are more expensive to make now, so we're gonna raise the
Right,
price
and so
of
they were
PlayStation 5."
losing more money when producing it, and I think that's
Yeah.
part of the reason why you're seeing that, like, kind of price bump is
Hmm.
because Nintendo is kind of give themselves a buffer in case the tariffs go crazy.
Hmm. So it's a sad reality. I'm not like super excited about it. Also, like I just realized it kind of hit me doubly because like I got my daughter loves to play games now. She really likes Mario Kart.
So now you gotta get 2 of these.
Now I have to get two because I can't share my Switch two. That's the whole thing. And also we have to play together. You can play together locally. There's also like a game share thing, which is a new
Mhm.
feature, so you can take some games and spread them to other games that are nearby locally for multiplayer. That's cool stuff. I want to hear about your hands-on time with the game, Sam. But just to cover the new stuff, there's also a new feature called Game Chat, which
Yeah, there's so
relies on
that's that
microphones.
C
And
button
they
that,
are
like,
pushing it.
everyone was like,
Yeah, they are
the
pushing it
biggest
so
enigma.
hard.
Yeah.
The microphones are built into the controllers. You could just talk at your controller. They're having group chats. The way they're pitching it, though, it feels like the heyday of like 2005 Xbox Live era. You know, where we all had headsets. Oh, this is amazing. We can all talk
Mhm.
to each other. I think Nintendo's 20 years too late to this.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be a whole thing. Yeah.
Also, Nintendo doesn't know what their primary demographic is, which
Mhm.
is exactly the demographic that shouldn't have a microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and in my hands-on, I kinda describe it as like, "Hey, Nintendo's discovered Discord and kind of built all of the things that people like about
Yes.
Discord and put it in the Switch to, like, natively," and that's great, and it's hard to complain about that. You will need, I believe, to have a subscription to NSO to use them,
Hmm.
um, so that's a little bit of a bummer. It's not, completely free like Discord. And then there also is a camera accessory that, so if you want to, like, stream yourself, or, like, whoever is in your group chat, they want to see you, you can
Hmm.
do that too. And it does have some gameplay implications for certain titles, but
Hmm.
we'll probably get to that in a little bit.
That camera looks terrible, by the way. Like even the demo footage they showed, like it's like
It's
is
a
this
very
a
basic camera.
720p sensor? Like it yeah, it looks really super
And it
basic.
costs $50, so it's actually one of the cheapest accessories for the Switch too. But
Yeah.
what are you gonna expect from, like, a dedicated $50 web camera?
It's a
It's
potato camera. Nintendo
yeah.
made a potato camera basically. It's like kind of hilarious to see. Another feature of Game Chat, or I don't, is it Game Chat or Game Share, where you can basically share what you're playing, like a stream of what you're playing to your friends too, built into the console. That's cool. That's
Mhm.
something mainly PC gamers do because you can do it through Discord easily. But I think that's kind of a nifty thing, maybe more useful than Game Chat itself. But let's talk about the games. Sam, you played the Mario Kart. You played everything that they had to offer, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
tell us a bit
Mhm.
about what the scene was like. Where was this? It was in Manhattan, right?
yeah, so this was, in Midtown Manhattan, and, so they just had a absolute crap ton of systems and TVs. They must have had 100, 150 different Switch 2 units connected to various TVs. And so I believe, don't quote me on this, that they are going to open up this experience to the public at some point.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of like, if you notice in the photographs, some of them are, like, very dark because it's like the lighting is very moody, which is cool and very gamery, but not exactly the best for, taking well lit photos. But anyways, and so they had just, like, huge rows of, like, booths, like, they had 30 different Mario Kart World booths all next to each other. And part of that was because Mario Kart World can now support 24 players at the same time. And
Mhm.
there's a new knockout tour mode where it's kind of like F-Zero 99, where you have 24 people. And then every few laps, as you're going through, like, multiple courses, the last four people get eliminated. And so you keep going until, like, there's only four people left. And then whoever wins, wins. And
That's
so
that's
that's
so
like,
cool. Yeah.
it's that was probably the most fun experience I had out of playing any game on the
Yeah.
Switch 2.
It will
Uh,
transform college campuses everywhere because like
yeah,
when you have so much time, you're like, we're gonna spend a couple hours just going through this entire map of Mario Party. I could just imagine how great that'll be. They basically made Mario Kart Horizon, right? Like it's very much Forza Horizon. You know?
Yeah, and there is like a little bit of that like free roam. It's not.
Mm,
I'm not so sure it's like fully open world, but like they call it a free roam mode where you can just drive from track to track
mhm,
seamlessly, just across different Grand Prix and different locations. And so the world feels a lot bigger and a lot more
mhm.
open. And there's also like little details like you get rain effects, which has not really been a thing in Mario Kart.
Yeah, weather
And
and day night cycles.
day night cycles, and so it like the world feels very alive. I kind of wish that like they would put a story mode in a Mario Kart game, which sounds crazy, but I think they could pull it off. But
They
we
did
didn't
it
get
for
that. But
Smash. They did it for Smash, right? They gave us an adventure mode. I think they that
yeah,
game
there's a story mode in Melee. Yeah,
that was a good
and some of the other
yeah.
titles, but I remember the Melee one the most.
I mean, we've been living with Mario Kart 8 essentially since the Wii U, right? The Switch version is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Feels like the better part of it, just like a decade, over a
Hmm.
decade. We've been living with Mario Kart 8. So this game, and Mario Kart, by the way, Mario Kart 8 has been the highest selling game like for the Switch by far.
Yeah.
Um, this game could live on forever. So this is I could just see a thing where they're like, oh yeah, in a couple of years, here's a full single player story mode adventure.
Yeah,
Here's some DLC. Yeah.
and it's crazy because you can tell that this thing is going to get tons of updates, but the roster is already huge. There's like so many different vehicles to play with. There's like a jet ski, there's scooters. I think there's some planes in there. They didn't have everything fully unlocked, so I wasn't able to try everything. And like, the roster of characters, I think you can play as the Moo cow from like the
Yeah,
old,
people loved that.
That
yeah,
out.
the old
Love it.
N64 Moo level, and it's like
Mhm.
they've just gone like fully bonkers, and I absolutely love it. It's like and I wanted to point out, like, for all
Mhm.
the people like concerned about the price of like individual games, you are really going to want that Switch 2 Mario Kart World bundle because
Yeah.
it basically
Yes.
makes Mario Kart cost $50 instead of like 70 or 80. And
Who's gonna
so
be buying the Switch 2 without Mario Kart?
it, it,
Like
it
I
is it is such a no-brainer. Like
yeah.
there's literally no reason that I can like think of to not get the bundle, at least if you're
Mhm.
gonna get it on launch.
Ju- just looking at this game because I'm playing a lot of Mario Kart now because what I can get to do now that my daughter's playing Mario Kart is my brother comes in. He is 5 years younger than me. We grew up playing games together. He has a Switch, and we can all sit in the living room just like have a massive race together. This thing looks like it's really changing the formula of Mario Kart beyond like the open world thing. Like the fact that what you're driving actually changes into a whole other vehicle. Whereas before you would do a thing where like, oh, now you're a hovercraft, now you're an
Right, or
underwater.
you get like a parachute or like a like a
The
big like
parachutes
hang
are gone.
glider sail. Yeah, yeah.
The hangar glider sails are gone because now it just becomes a plane or something. Just really reshaping what this thing is and just being able to the free roam thing. You can just ride around the map for fun.
Yeah, it was cool
That's
because while
cool.
I was waiting in like the lobby for like
Yeah.
all the 24 players to like get ready, I was just
Mhm.
driving around tracks like free roam style. And there's actually like little characters that'll like talk to you and like, so there's like, they've
Mhm.
tried to populate the world a little bit. It was really hard to tell how much, but like, they have definitely put some thought into, like you said, kind of really changing up the formula to make it, a little bit more open, a little bit more expansive.
Mhm. This is cool. This game, like, I think this game will just like take over our lives for a better portion of the next few years. What else? Like, what was the other thing or your next favorite game that you played there?
I was probably Donkey Kong Bonanza. This is like it's been a while since we had like a real like 3D Donkey Kong game,
Yeah.
and especially because there's no brand new Zelda game, there's no brand new like Mario platformer. Obviously, there's Mario Kart World, but like so this is kind of like the flagship like single player game for the Switch 2 at launch. Um, and it's really interesting because Donkey Kong is like I'm not even sure like what the pretext or like
Mhm.
the setting for this world is, but it opens up and Donkey Kong is in a mine and he's like digging for gold and there's
Uh,
like banana gems buried in the earth and Donkey Kong is just like a miner now. So he just goes along and he like is digging and he finds stuff in the ground. And there's like mechanics where like the ground pound will now like displace dirt and you can straight up dig tunnels like down into the earth or up, through rock. And then he also has like a ground pound and like he can pick up rocks and throw them at enemies. That's like one of his main attacks.
mhm.
And so it's really like, once again kind of changing up the formula for what you expect from like a Donkey Kong game because it's like this is not just like Donkey Kong's Jungle Land. Okay, this is
Right,
like
right.
this is everywhere. He's like under subterranean, going through caves, spelunking. Yeah.
Let's show the video there, Ben, because I have that layered up too. But this,
Yes, but
yeah.
Sam, what do you think? Who do you think this Donkey Kong game is aimed at? Because you were saying that it felt kind of like a Kirby game in that it
Mm.
was like a little simplistic.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like it seems like, Kirby games a lot of times are like very like child oriented. They're meant to be like very easy and like kind of breezy.
Mhm.
And, whereas like I would consider like, something like Mario Odyssey a little bit more advanced in terms of like just difficulty and like challenging. And I feel like Donkey Kong Bonanza is kind of in between those, where like there's a lot of like, at least in the beginning, where like I was just like running around and just slapping rocks for like,
Mhm.
a minute, 2 minutes straight. And so it's like there's just like a little like a level of just like I'm just gonna smash buttons and it's gonna work out for me. And so like there's definitely like they've made it easy and very accessible. But as I was playing a little bit more, I could tell that like there is a little bit there's definitely more to this mechanic.
Yeah.
And so like obviously, I didn't have a ton of time to play, and so I'm sure there is more depth to it. But it's really interesting how they're trying to kind of balance like accessibility with having like more sophisticated gameplay for us older players.
It looks fun. It looks fun. In the stream here, by the way, like as we're looking at it, it's a little like I think the frame rate isn't as good as it normally does. But the other thing I want to point out about the Switch too is that it seems like 60 FPS just gonna be standard and most likely 1080p, 60
Oh yeah,
FPS.
I forgot to mention, Mario Kart World was running at 120 FPS, and it looks so good.
Yeah.
I'm so happy. I couldn't really tell like HDR as much. There was a couple demos with like the upgraded versions of like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom that makes HDR a lot more obvious. But because of like Nintendo's kind of cartoony art style for some of the games, especially Mario Kart, it
Hmm.
doesn't actually benefit quite as much from HDR. But that 120 FPS is so nice, especially for Mario Kart, which is like all about speed. So you really, can tell more about you're getting an advantage in terms of like, that extra performance and refresh rate.
I feel like for clutch moments, the only time I really feel the difference of like super high refresh rate, so like 120, 144, and 240, is if I'm doing like sniper work in Overwatch or something like a thing
Mhm.
where like real smooth movement and like a hair trigger, click kind of makes a difference. So in Mario Kart, where a lot of things are clutch, I could see that being a big deal. The other thing too, like so it has the power to do 1080 60. That's actually pretty significant. It also seems like this is a friendlier console for third party developers, and that is a big deal too, because it was the Wii U just crumbled because it only played like old third party games. The Switch had a decent amount early on, but it was never even as powerful as like the
Yeah.
Xbox.
There were so many games that
Like
developers didn't even try to port because they knew that it would just like trying to get it to run even just like
yeah,
halfway decently on the Switch just wasn't going to be an option.
yeah. So we're seeing things like, hey, there's an Elden Ring game coming. There is even if they're
There's a
old.
FromSoft game.
Well, there is a FromSoft game coming too, but there's also an Elden Ring game coming, or like a separate. Is it just like a different edition of Elden Ring? I guess.
I think it's like so the Switch in large Switch 2 in large part is getting a bunch of like ports, but like kind of remastered ports to kind of play nicely with the Switch's 2 features and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
so yeah, there's gonna be I think it's called the Tarnished Edition for Elden
Yes.
Ring. There's that Dust Bloods, which is don't call it Bloodborne, but even though it looks a hell of a lot like
It
Bloodborne.
looks like
Okay, yeah. So
Bloodborne.
I am getting that confused with Dusk Bloods because I
Yes.
thought that was just one thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I was talking about it with some people, and it's like I think Sony still has like the IP or like copyright to Bloodborne, and
Mhm.
then
Yes.
Nintendo was like, "Hey, can you make us Bloodborne
Can we
2?"
just
And they're
do
like, "No, we
Bloodborne?
technically can't do that, but we can make you this game, and we're gonna change the title and enjoy because hey, it's gonna be I believe it's gonna be a Switch 2 exclusive, and it looks a hell of a lot like Bloodborne, but the title's different, but hey, it looks good."
It looks. I mean, it looks like their typical thing. I kind of cackled when that was the secret game, like the one more thing at the end of the stream. I think I was like, did they just steal Bloodborne from Sony?
Yeah.
Kind of. They stole like part of the concept from Sony, but also like we're gonna see a whole bunch of other things. Microsoft has said Call of Duty games will appear on
Hmm.
future Nintendo hardware. This thing is powerful enough to run like a new Call of Duty. They have not announced that yet,
Yep.
but I could see like the next version this year's Call of Duty could be a big splash on this thing. This just really seems like, man, they have addressed pretty much all the concerns we had with Switch 1. I'm still wondering like what the battery life is going to be like. I'm worried about the price of the new games and how that can be a new standard, but also this is peak Nintendo, right? Like they have finally had decent graphics power. They are really leaning into the portability aspect of it too.
Hmm.
This isn't a situation like where the Wii U. I think like by the time the Wii U was happening, I think even Nintendo felt like, oh, maybe the Wii was a bit of a kind of a fad. Like it was kind of a fad to have motion controls in a cheap. What they needed then was a cheap box to save the company because the GameCube was such a disaster, and the Wii ended up being that and kind of a novelty. But you can't live on that forever. So think of like the company jumping from a sure bet like the Wii to the Wii U, which was a gamble, but the Wii U gave them tablet experience that led to the Switch. So the story
Yeah.
of Nintendo over here.
And
Anything else
I
you
want
want
to
to
call
know?
out
Yeah,
one
go
thing
ahead.
real quick when we're talking
Mhm.
about like third-party ports is that
Yes.
Nintendo hasn't told us much about whatever chip or processor is inside the Switch 2, but we know it is made by it's a custom NVIDIA chip,
Oh,
and it does support DLSS and hardware-based ray tracing, which I think is going to be like kind of what you were saying. It gives
mhm.
developers a lot more tools to port games over, and I'm really thinking about like the Switch 2's performance in a way that like it's not lagging behind whatever current Sony and Xbox stuff can do. Obviously, that could change whenever we get a new PlayStation or Xbox, like down the line. But it's at least there's parity between all the the current gen systems, and so it is going to make porting and just like developing a lot easier for developers.
For sure. I mean, we were talking about that with the Xbox stuff. It actually doesn't make sense for Microsoft to do just another high-powered console box because Sony is so dominant in that area. So
Hmm.
Microsoft is thinking about portables, kind of following the footsteps of the Switch here too. Sony is thinking about a portable once again. The era of having like a single box that just lives underneath your TV, like that seems like it's dying. Maybe Microsoft could rethink that. I'm thinking just make that sucker a Windows box or something, like make it more functional for us. But the old idea of a console just kind of seems dead, especially when like the Switch 2 can do all this. So, any other thoughts on games you want to point out, Sam? Because we got
Yeah, I saw some people mentioning Metroid Prime
Metroid
4.
Prime 4.
Metroid
Okay,
Prime.
I have to fully admit I prefer my 2D Metroids over my 3D Metroids.
Mhm,
But that said, Metroid Prime, it's not the most graphically impressive game, and I think
mhm.
maybe that's just because it's been so long in development that like
Yeah.
they didn't really know what they could do with the Switch 2. That said, it plays really nicely, and we didn't mention this before, but the Switch 2 now has kind of sort of like a built-in mouse functionality, and
Yes.
I want
I
to be
wanted
clear,
to
that
talk
works for
about
both
this.
the left and right Joy-Cons, separately.
Oh, so
Uh,
if you're a left-handed mouse person, you can use it as a left-handed mouse.
yeah,
That's
yeah, and
amazing.
it's
Huh.
kind of like they're taking some definitely like PC cues because there's a setting in Metroid Prime where you can adjust the mouse sensitivity and stuff like that. And so basically, what I did is like I used the right Joy-Con, turned it into a mouse, and they conveniently had tables set up in front of like the
Mhm.
Metroid Prime stations because you are gonna really want a flat surface. You can use it on your legs, but I found that was like a just terrible experience. And so I was using the right Joy-Con as a mouse on a flat surface, and I was using the left Joy-Con as like a traditional controller. And I actually kind of preferred that because I'm more of a PC shooter player, so I like having a mouse and keyboard. And that was very kind of recreated that experience where I have the precision of a Metroid Prime or the precision of a mouse
Mhm.
in Metroid Prime, and then I could use the left Joy-Con for like movement, forward, back,
Yeah.
left, right, whatever.
Finally, all my PC gaming friends no longer have an excuse of saying, "Oh, I'm more of a PC gamer. That's why I'm
Yeah,
trash
yeah,
at this
yeah.
game." Like if this game was ported to
Yeah.
PC, I'd be so good at keyboard and mouse. Now put up or shut up.
A
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
PC gamers are using console controllers now too, so that's a whole thing.
And I think Mark down in the chat was asking, like, did
Yeah.
I try the mouse on different surfaces? It should work on like cloth or like maybe like a couch cushion or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the issues with the mouse functionality is because when you turn the Joy-Con kind of
Mhm.
sideways, it's kind of like tall and skinny, and so it wants to kind of lean over a little bit, and it'll
Mhm.
still work when you do that. But it doesn't feel as stable as like a traditional mouse, which is kind of have a wider base. I am 100% positive that you could either 3D print it or someone's going to come out with an accessory that you can slot the Joy-Con into so that it
Mhm.
feels more like a regular mouse. And kind of when you're holding it sideways, you use the shoulder buttons as like your left and right click. So it does feel sort of similar, but not quite, what you'd expect for a traditional mouse. but hey, it has like all the basic features right there, and it really does feel pretty good. I was kind of
Mhm,
surprised. I thought it was kind of gimmicky, and I'm like slow. I was like kind of quickly came around to like,
mhm.
hey, this could be a legitimate option for a lot of people.
That's a bit of like Nintendo ingenuity too. Like I don't want to. I'm sounding like a fanboy because I think this company is one of my favorites, one of my first loves in the tech world and the gaming world. But like this, who else is gonna be like, yeah, man, let's just turn our controllers into mice and let's see what happens. And then what happens is you get Civilization coming to your console in a way that you can play it like legitimately.
I
In a way,
played Civ on the
yeah.
Switch too, and don't get me wrong, like it's definitely a little bit clunkier than you would
Mhm.
on a PC, and the load times were like pretty long. That said, it is a Sid Meier game. That's kind of par for the
Yes,
course.
yes.
But I mean, if you want to play like Civ 7 in bed or on the couch or somewhere that's not a desk, man, like I would think hard about using the Switch 2 instead of like a laptop and being confined to a touchpad. I actually think it's a better experience with the Switch 2 than just being limited to a strictly like laptop touchpad for Civ 7.
And the Steam Deck has actual touchpads too, like on the side too. So there are ways the portable PC gaming handhelds have been thinking about this, but this
Hmm.
actually seems a little, I think, a little more functional for a lot of people. So it's a cool thing. I don't know how much I'm going to be using it, but it's just cool that Nintendo thought to even put that in because it's so not a thing I think any console company is really thinking about. You can plug a mouse into your PlayStation or your Xbox, but very few people are doing that. You know,
And
the
it's funny because
strong.
Lenovo actually kind of beat Nintendo to the punch because on the Legion Go you can take I want to say Joy-Con, but it's just the controller,
You're
and
right,
then there's like a little base, and you can use it as sort of like a vertical mouse, and they call it
right,
FPS mode.
right.
But this is one of those things where like Nintendo maybe saw that idea and they have polished it to the point where it's a much more pleasant experience to use than anything the Legion Go can do. And so it's like it's really interesting to see how like, you know, the original Switch inspired this like recent wave of like PC
Hmm.
gaming handhelds, and now it's kind of come full circle because now Nintendo's looking at some of the PC gaming handheld competition and kind of borrowing features and kind of polishing them more for
Hmm.
maybe a more mainstream audience that
For
might
sure.
not want to deal with a Legion Go.
I don't think we would have seen this screen, like this level of like they're going to go to 120 hertz, they're going to do HDR. I don't think we would have seen this if there weren't things like the Steam Deck kind of pushing forward and the ROG
Yeah,
Ally and
this
everything.
is a classic case of like more competition is always good for the consumer. Like you can't just think about the Nintendo Switch competing against
Mhm.
PlayStation and Xbox anymore. It's all the handhelds, it's all the consoles, it's laptops, it's everything.
I do wonder like how looking at this, I wonder how like what would Microsoft do as a portable? And the only thing I can think of like, well, it's a Game Pass machine, right? Like you can stream easily to it, you could download games easily to it. I don't know how effective that will be for them. I also don't know how many portables people can have because actually in my house right now, I'm like, I got the Switch, I have Steam Deck, I have the one of the other. It's not an IO Neo, but one of the other like other ones I use for smaller
Hmm.
games. You've got a bunch of devices now that you have to worry about like charging and juggling into. Like there's going to be an upper limit in terms of how many people can actually do. Whereas for consoles that sit under your TV, the only like the only kind of barrier there was cost for most people because like you could always kind of fit in another box somewhere. So I feel like that's going to be a thing ultimately.
Speaking of
Yeah.
which, there is the Nintendo Game Pass,
I mean, the Switch Online thing, which
the
is
Switch
sort of
Online, but also the GameCube
we get GameCube. We
streaming.
get
So
GameCube now and Switch Online. What do you
well,
think?
I will say, like, we were out at the demo experience. We were kind of watching the presentation live, and that the announcement of like GameCube games coming to NSO subscription that got by far the largest cheer, and I was like, not entirely. I was a little bit surprised because it's like,
Of course,
don't
it
get me
got the largest cheer. Think of the demographics you were hanging out with.
okay.
It must have been
That's a
mostly
fair
over
point. That's a
30.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's like
Yeah.
so and don't get me wrong, I am very happy to see like an remastered version of Wind Waker, one of the most beloved Zelda games of all time.
Yep.
But it's like we kind of knew they were gonna do this. There was that like GameCube controller accessory
Mhm.
for the original Switch, and so there was kind of hints that like you could probably expect this. Um, that
Mhm.
said, the new kind of GameCube controller for the Switch 2, it does have a built-in mic, so you can still use all your chat features, which is it's kind of nice. Um,
Also, new GameCube controller plus GameCube on Game Pass means that there is going to be a Super Smash Bros. Melee renaissance.
Is there?
Maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't
Okay,
announced the
do
full
any
slate
of
of,
you
like,
guys
GameCube games.
know? Does anyone else here know about the Super Smash Brothers like competitive scene?
Oh yeah,
Those people
the
are
melee
insane
community
about
is
Pokemon.
like
The Melee
monsters.
community is so
It
strong,
is great, but
and this was like
they are
20
also
years after the
yeah.
game was no longer relevant.
Those people are insane, Ben. Like that's the other thing. Like they're never gonna play Melee on a virtual console. Is the thing. Like they has to be original hardware for them. It's a whole thing for all those tournaments.
We'll see. We'll
We'll
see.
see. I do want to say, did you play Wind Waker, Sam?
Yeah, I played it very good. It's still 4x3, which is a little weird
Mhm.
on today's modern like widescreen things.
Mhm.
Um, but it looks great, and it's one of those games where it's like you could tell they've put a little bit work into it, but because of like the cell shaded graphics and Wind
Looks
Waker
great.
looked good back then, they
Yeah.
still look great now. But like once again, you're not seeing that like HDRness or like
Yeah.
you're not benefiting a ton from 120 FPS. So it's like, look, I love that like it's available in a more accessible way,
Yeah.
but it's kind of hitting more on that nostalgic factor than it's just like, oh hey, like this is like a tour de force of a release.
I kind of feel like this is a little disrespectful to Wind Waker, is the thing, right? Like, if freaking Twilight Princess got a real re-release, like that game was not very good. That game was fine for the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
I think Wind Waker. I remember playing Wind Waker in college on the GameCube. I'm like, how is this happening? How is this game? How does this game look so good? The other thing is like hackers and emulators have been playing Wind Waker at like 4K 60 FPS on computers for a long time, and people have been speculating like this really makes Nintendo look bad. It
yeah.
makes the Switch One's hardware look bad, and what they end up doing is just giving us a slightly better Wind Waker via the GameCube emulation layer, and not like a full-fledged we love Wind Waker. We're going to give it a full remaster. It is nice. It's more accessible because it's part of the Nintendo Switch Online subscription now. But that's a great game. That game deserved like a real remaster and like I wouldn't mind spending another 40 or $50 to get like a really nicely polished widescreen version of Wind Waker that looks even better.
Hmm.
That's just my
Fingers
opinion.
crossed this might be like an intermediate offering.
I don't think they can do that. I think this is just like, hey guys, this is the best we can do. We're just a little small company,
Yeah.
and we can only do
Also,
so much.
for all the like the really nerdy tech heads out there, during the developer Q&A, someone asked if these GameCube games are being emulated on software or hardware,
Hmm.
and this is a general simplification of their response, but they said it's mostly software emulation, which is interesting because it kind of shows that like the Switch 2 has the horsepower to do everything in software. They didn't have to go back and like farm out some like old GameCube chips and like shove them in the Switch 2.
That
So
that that
that's
never was going to happen.
that,
That
yeah, that like if you think about it, like that was not a realistic approach. Like like when they put the cell processor in like the PS3 and stuff like that, but
no, they put the emotion engine in the
right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
if for anyone who's curious about that, that's kind of how they're doing it, but that's more of a simplified explanation.
that's kind of cool. We got a lot of other news to get to, Sam. So, are there any final thoughts? Like, how do you feel about the Switch 2? Do you feel like the price is good for what you're getting and the kind of innovation you're seeing here?
Like, don't get me wrong. I really wish. I think if the Switch 2 came out at $400, it would have been an unmitigated home run, massive
Yeah,
success.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think they are still going to sell boatloads of these things at 450, but I am not. I understand where kind of some of the frustration where people have that sticker shock of seeing, hey, the thing costs $150 more than the last, the original model, and then
Yeah.
the accessories and the games are also getting more expensive too, and that the economy is kind of in a weird place right now. And so I definitely feel that pressure from some people. I do want to call out two small things. Is like I think the hardware is really great, but there are two titles that I think Nintendo is not giving like the proper love to,
Hmm.
and that is Drag and Drive. It's Drag X Drive is how they write it out. And it's kind of like wheelchair basketball,
That's
and
cool. Yeah.
it feels more like a tech demo to show off because it's based around the Joy Cons mouse controls, and you kind of push the mouse control the Joy Cons back and forth as if you're like spinning the wheels on a wheelchair. But it feels more like a tech demo and not even like to the level of ARMS. If anyone remembers ARM back on the original Switch,
God,
it
arms.
feels it
Yeah.
feels like a tech demo that is designed to kind of showcase the Joy-Cons mouse capabilities, but not really a full-fledged game on its own. And I think that kind of sucks because in some respects, it's like a great workout because you are just like
Yeah.
pumping your arms in order to move. And there's like, it could have been like something more like a Rocket League type game where it's like,
Mhm.
I was saying it was like Arms X Rocket League,
yeah, yeah.
actually.
There's definitely that feeling. It's just I don't know if the depth is quite there, and they
Mhm.
haven't released pricing for this game. But even at $20, I feel like that might not be enough. And I really wish they had just packed it in with a Switch because it is a great
Yeah.
showcase of the Switch's capability, Switch Two capabilities. And if it had been like, pre-installed on the console at launch, I think it would get a lot more run and just more people will play it. And I think a lot of people might overlook it because it doesn't have the depth of Donkey Kong, even if it is a little less expensive.
Mhm.
And I think this goes
At least it's
double.
$20. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this goes double for the Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which is just a straight up demo.
Yeah.
It like you walk around and you go up to like little characters and it tells you about like the Switch 2's like features and like hardware capabilities, and then you like earn points by like answering quizzes based on like what they tell you. But the thing is that like they haven't released US pricing, but it's going to be about like the equivalent of like $10 in yen over in Japan. So it's not going to be free. It's not going to be, pre-installed in the system. But this is like a straight up hardware demo, and I think it would be really useful for
Yeah.
people to be
Yeah.
able to like, oh hey, I want to learn about the demo. And there was like a cool demo about like the HD Rumble 2 and like explaining how it works and how it's kind of different from what they did on the original HD Rumble for the Switch. And
Yeah.
it's like I think that would be such a good intro to be like, if you are not super nerdy and you want to know more about this $450 console that you just bought, it would be so nice to have it just right there sitting in the home screen, for people to kind of explore their system with.
Like
Yeah.
a free thing for you to download if you wanted, not
Sure.
like
Sure.
bloatware that came with the
And
Switch,
Sony
like
kind of did
installed.
this with the PS5 with kind of the
Yes.
Astros playground, and it's like,
Yes.
come on.
Come on, that seems a little egregious. The pricing reveal of this thing is kind of hilarious too because we were so high doing the live block. We were high on like, oh my god, the hardware looks so good, the games look so good. Nintendo's delivering everything we wanted. Then they said bye bye. We'll tell you more later. And 1 minute later, we saw a press release drop with the price. So it's like it's almost like they definitely did not want to contaminate the great spirits you were getting from the direct feed. Maybe
Hmm.
they did that thing fully produced before they actually locked in the price. I think that's more likely.
Yeah,
But
I
it was
think they try to
spectacular.
give themselves some freedom to like, hey, what are these tariffs going to do? Are we don't want to change the
Yeah,
pricing last minute and then have to redo the entire video.
yeah,
Yeah.
or even just
The
like
terrible
yeah,
And the
uh,
terrible thing about prices elasticity is also that it's very unlikely that the price of the Switch 2 will ever go down. So let's say these tariffs get voted down by Congress, because
yeah.
it can get voted down by Congress. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's very unlikely that Nintendo is going to be like, congratulations, everybody. Now the Switch is like
Exactly.
375 or
Maybe
$400.
maybe in several years that'll be the case. So that was just kind of the hilarious moment. It was like we were so flying high on like the Switch Direct stream, and then it ended, and we're like, ah, the crushing reality of market economics.
Hmm.
This thing is $450. We didn't talk about we'll play older Switch games. They haven't like released the ones that definitely won't work, I think. And some
The
games,
only so at the
go ahead.
round table again, the only one they mentioned that won't work is Labo for kind of obvious
Yeah,
reasons.
yeah,
The Switch 2 is bigger and it doesn't like fit inside the Labo cardboard. But they said that they're gonna put a full list of non-compatible games online at some point,
that's great.
probably obviously closer to launch.
Some games will also have upgrade packs for like higher quality graphics. That's cool to see.
Mhm.
Also, the ones for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the Zelda games will come as part of the Nintendo Switch Online, the GameCube upgrade pack. So that's confusing, but also
And there's a little like
thing. Yeah,
I think there's a way to like view the like Breath of the Kingdom map on your phone, kind of mimicking how it was on the Wii U, I believe. But yeah.
Breath of the
yeah.
Kingdom,
Breath
Tears
of
of
the
the
I'm
Kingdom,
Kingdom.
Breath
sorry,
of the Wild.
Breath
Too
of the
bad.
Wild, my
Too bad
bad.
you went. Yeah,
I am a little confused about why Nintendo gave the Switch 1 2 big Zelda games, and now how long are we gonna have to wait for a Zelda on the Switch 2? That's
it's gonna be.
crazy.
It's gonna be. I mean, the Switch one was around for a long time. Like it had a really long
I
life.
remember writing
Yeah,
years ago that like we
yeah,
thought the Switch 2 or the Switch Pro, as like we called it
yeah.
back then, was gonna come out years ago, and it just never happened.
That ended up being the Switch OLED, and I think it was probably wise of Nintendo not to like split off its whole thing and like, hey, we have a slightly more powerful Switch. Let's hold off on the Switch 2 for a while. They kind of just hunkered down on like 2017, honestly 2016 era Nvidia hardware, and just kind of rode that out for almost a whole decade. This is like if you bought a video card 10 years ago, like I'm just gonna keep going. gonna lower the resolution, gonna make it like work somehow on my PC. They stuck it out to this whole thing. I feel like that's all of it. We're definitely gonna be talking more about the Switch 2. And yeah, stay tuned for coverage. I know you have some thoughts you want to put down, Sam. We are definitely going to be looking at this hardware, and I already have thoughts, and I cannot wait to get my hands on this thing. So stay tuned, folks. We could talk to chat a bit, but it's late, so we should.
Yeah.
I'll blast through news, basically. Yeah,
Yep.
That way we can do more chat at the end,
yeah,
anyways.
yeah. How we doing, chat room?
So a new user, Evil Turkey, I hope you're still
Hey,
around, because Evil Turkey said very early in the segment, drop the price.
drop.
And
Oh
then I
yeah,
think we
yeah.
mentioned the price again, and all they said was, pendejo Nintendo.
Everything is expensive. Unfortunately, it sucks.
Yeah, but I will say that I think your comparison with the Steam Deck is very apt because they are kind of similar in price,
Yeah.
and I think for a lot of people, the Switch 2 is going to be a much more convincing device.
Well, yeah, another user, Certified Quality, said, dude, I'd rather get the PS5 portable, or like that's like buying a Steam Deck in USD, because it
Mhm.
absolutely is. I just looked it
Mhm.
up. I think the non OLED Steam Deck is around $400.
It is
Mhm.
$400. Yeah. That I mean that's why I mentioned that. And then if you step up to like 550, you get the like slightly better screen and stuff. You have to pay a lot more to get to OLED. Um this is kind of the price range we're dealing with now. Is $400 to $600. At least it's not $500. I could see a world where Nintendo justified pricing this thing at $500 because people would pay it. And I think for a lot of people, it will be $500 because you're going to buy it with Mario Kart World. So it will kind of just feel like that. It sucks. It does suck that this is how everything is. Like I noticed it when I go to the grocery store. I noticed it in almost every aspect of our lives these days. We will talk more about why that's happening. Yeah. No announced games for the second half of the year, says Mark Dell. Oh, I mean,
Not
they gotta
yet, at
drips
least.
and drabs of info. Like we gotta get the launch. Let's pass the launch.
Yeah, yeah. They're not gonna they're not gonna go too far in the future because they want people to like scoop up those launch games and stuff like
Well,
that.
you also know they did show Silk Song. They did have like a
Yeah,
scheduled
it's
release.
alive. It's
Silk
real.
Song is here 2025 at some point. So
Oh,
they're
speaking
excited.
of indie darlings, also Toby, the what is it, chapters 3 and 4 of Deltarune? That's Toby
Yeah, yeah,
Fox's
yep, yep.
like
Yep.
new game, sort of new game, because it's still connected to Undertale.
hmm I
Um,
see Mo Esquire saying is the Steam Deck is way more convincing for them at this point. I totally get that too. The other thing about the Switch is it ended up being a really good indie gaming console. Like the eShop is honestly filled with too much stuff. There's too much garbage out there. But a lot of those indie games that ended up on Steam, like did eventually appear on Switch. Some of them ended up day and date on Switch because the Switch was such a popular console and was more
mhm.
accessible to people than PCs. So I could still that see that being a case for the Switch. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I've been waiting for all the Final Fantasy like remakes to like finish for that third chapter to come out. And I
Yeah.
actually feel sort of vindicated that I didn't buy it on PlayStation because I would love to play that portable and it's going to be available on the Switch too.
Yeah.
I also want to mention quickly that I did get a chance to play like Cyberpunk 2077 and Street Fighter 6 on the Switch too, and those games ran really, really well. And
Sure.
so, like for a lot of people, like they were kind of leaning towards like the Steam Deck and PC handhelds because you would get like better
Mhm.
performance from like third-party ports that like just weren't available on the Switch. Whereas like now you actually kind of have to think about it because some of these ports just they run really well, and it's like
Mhm.
unless you're doing like a straight up like side by side comparison, like even if they're using like DLSS and like some upscaling stuff like that, they just look good and they look like surprisingly smooth. Coming from the Switch was like kind of chuggish.
The Switch was always chuggish. Like that was the thing. Like even playing Breath of the Wild, as amazing as that game was, the 30 FPS really like hurt my experience with that and Tears of the Kingdom too. I kind of want to just replay them all again now, like with the
Yeah.
better Switch 2 graphics, like officially. Cyberpunk, I will say, I'm testing a lot of video cards, like doing these reviews and running in 1080p, like lower, cheaper video cards run Cyberpunk really well beyond 60 FPS with all the graphics cranked up. So I could
Mhm.
totally see it being pretty decent on a Switch 2 with like mid-level graphics even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other thing I thought that was really interesting is that one of the devs during the roundtable mentioned that they specifically worked really really hard to make sure that the Switch 2 eShop runs really smoothly. So if
Good.
anyone who
Wow.
like use a Switch, that thing the eShop is just like
Yeah.
the laggiest piece of like app on the entire
It's
Switch.
a nightmare.
And
Yeah.
And so they said it was like a company wide effort. They like talked to like the server engineers and the hardware engineers and the app people to make sure that like everything loads smoothly and scrolls nicely and stuff like that. Which I thought was like a really like really niche thing because hey, if you want to buy games, you have to go to the eShop digitally.
Mhm.
So they could have just like not tried because you're forced to use it, but they really really like wanted to make sure that like everything ran nice and smoothly and yeah. So
It's
I
just
thought
that
that was a very interesting aside.
if people can more easily access your shop, they will buy more stuff.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting, magical, like economic formula there. It's surprising it took them this long to kind
I
of.
did not get a chance to ask about the music though. Sorry.
Oh man, we're gonna get some of that. We didn't mention like the whole pre-order thing happening, but essentially they're kind of like limiting it right now to Switch Online subscribers who've been subscribed for a while and have played like 50 hours of games. I think that's gonna be relaxed eventually. I did sign up for that because I'm gonna need a second Switch 2. I'm gonna need another. I'm gonna need multiple Switch 2s.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're
Yeah.
going to be spending $900 on Switch 2s.
A lot of Switch 2s, unfortunately. All right, we should get on to news, and we're just gonna
Yep.
keep moving. Okay. Moving on to some other news, let's talk a little bit about why the Switch 2 may be so expensive. This week, the Trump administration announced massive, expansive global tariffs, a 10% universal tariff on pretty much everything coming into the country, but also additional tariffs on multiple countries with a weird formula. The formula was like based on the trade deficit we have with them. It's really dumb, really silly. Basically, a lot of things are going to get more expensive, and from some countries, significantly more expensive. There was already a 20% tariff against China. I think they just announced an additional 35% tariff, so 55% more for goods coming from China. That's pretty much everything. It's going to hit Taiwan. It's going to hit Japan.
Speaking of China, not that
Yeah.
it's really tech related, but RIP Shein and Temu.
I mean, yeah, the entire drop shipping like idea of selling things, that's going to go away. The Trump administration called this quote Liberation Day. I kind of prefer the Economist headline this morning. It's Ruination Day, unfortunately. So it's gonna be bad, folks. Like if you are wondering why the Switch 2 is so expensive, if you're wondering why eggs are expensive, or anything that you're going to be seeing coming out of Taiwan or India too, which is producing a lot of like agricultural goods for us, but also some devices. It's going to directly affect the tech world. And the way I'm seeing it framed is that, oh yeah, these retaliatory tariffs, right? The more expensive ones, it's really just a way to force other countries to, buy more from us or reduce their own like tariffs against the US or whatever. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. People keep framing what the Trump administration is doing as sort of like, oh yeah, it's really actually smart because it'll make other countries behave better with us. Nobody thinks that. Pretty much every like economic expert I've read at this point say like there is no real logic or justification to doing things this way. It's just going to be really bad. Like it's a really bad bullying maneuver that could affect the entire global economy and also the tech world. That's our
Yeah.
kind of angle here. But yeah.
Did you see China, Japan, and South Korea all decided like, hey, we're going to get together and respond to these tariffs in kind? Do
Yeah.
you know how much it takes to get those folks to cooperate?
Yeah, they never agree on anything. And I think someone said like the last time they agreed to do a joint anything was like 5 years ago. And it's
Yes.
like, what the hell? But like, okay, granted, I'm not an economist, but like,
Mhm.
if you have if the whole goal was to bring manufacturing and industry back to the US, you have two ways of doing it, right? You have incentives where you can subsidize people or give them tax breaks and like make it economically or like financially beneficial for them to hey stop offshoring production to other countries and stuff like that, or you can do what Trump's doing and you can just throw tons of taxes and basically punish everyone for the accepted behavior, corporate behavior of like the last like 20-30 years. And so he chose the punishing one instead of like, trying to incentivize, people to do or companies to do what he thinks is the right thing. And now because he's doing the
Mhm.
punish one, the whole economy, stock market is in just like pure chaos.
You kind
It,
of look
it
at this,
makes it makes no sense.
you look at this and you see how this guy can bankrupt a casino, a thing which is really hard to do. incredibly hard to do. So anyway, brace yourselves, folks. Like I can tell you how I've been thinking about this and preparing for it. Last week during like Amazon spring whatever event, spring sales event, a lot of things were on sale. It's like I'm gonna finally get into NAS. I'm gonna build a NAS. I'm gonna get a QNAP 4-bay NAS, get some drives going, really start up to save my data. Did the final total would be about $900 with the NAS, two hard drives, and this is like before bad tariff pricing. Okay, and that was like $900 for backup data backup, which is important. But I already back up a lot of stuff to the cloud. I have like stuff backed up on multiple computers already. I don't have like a single localized solution for me and my wife and my whole family. And I just canceled that whole thing because it's like I cannot justify that to myself knowing kind of where our economy is going to be going. And I think people are going to be making a lot of those decisions too. Some people made that I'm talking to are like, oh, I got to lock in my next big purchase before these tariffs really hit. These are going to have sweeping effects, not just on the American economy, but the entire global economy. It's all we can say right now is like strap in. It is going to be kind of rough, and we're going to be covering like exactly how it's hitting the PC industry, the electronics industry in many ways. But the basics is everything is going to get more expensive. Like if that's the main thing to understand here. Um, Strap in, folks. As Samuel L. Jackson said in Jurassic Park, hold on to your butts because it's going to get scary out there. Yeah.
So another big thing from this week is that the TikTok divest or ban deadline is coming up this Saturday, the 5th. And there is just a bunch of news on whether or not like TikTok is going to sell, whether or not ByteDance is going to retain a stake. I
Mhm.
just saw something in the information about how ByteDance might try to maintain a stake,
Mhm.
or that China may still have like some connection to the algorithm, because the algorithm is not as scary to lawmakers now as like,
Yeah.
I don't know, 10 other things. So we have a post up on the site talking about all of the possible buyers for TikTok. A leading one is Oracle. Amazon just put in a bid. This
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense if you think of TikTok more as a shopping app via TikTok Shop than anything else. And I think that's smart because, I mean, it does come from China. China does like roll its e commerce into its entertainment apps a lot better. You also have Microsoft in the running, Perplexity, Project Liberty,
God.
which includes some guy from Shark Tank, Mr. Beast. Like it's an absolute clown car
All
of
Mr. Beast
people.
did was just like tweet. He just did one tweet, I believe. But
But
anyway,
still we're talking about him. So
yeah,
good job, I
good
guess.
job. Amazon, AppLovin, OnlyFans CEO Tim Stokely. So shout out to Krista Bell at Engadget, who's been like following this and kind of collating all this stuff that's been happening. We don't quite know. I will say some weird stuff is happening on TikTok. Like people are saying the app feels a little different now after like it was resurrected through Trump's illegal magic, I guess. I'm still like looking at stuff there. I'm also seeing more footage like, America has really lied to us. Like the government has lied to us about China. Things are actually not so bad in China. There are a lot of Americans living in China. They're having happy lives. The government's not so bad. Censorship's not so bad. It's all like kind of like government like US lies. There's definitely more of that out there. Just saying, hey Americans, life is so much better in China. Just come here. And
I have no idea. Like the
yeah,
TikTok user base has a tendency to be kind of conspiracy minded. So
it does.
the idea of people saying, "Oh my god, I never saw ads for Instagram on TikTok before the first shutdown in January." I don't know what that means.
I
People
will
were, like,
vent last
talking
night.
very credulously
Yeah,
about the possibility that, like, "Oh, the downtime was just to migrate all the data onto Meta's servers,"
that
as
that
if
was garbage.
that was actually something that was real. That was so
people
dumb.
people just like will stupid conspiracies into existence, sure. But I will tell you, last night while I was tired in bed after putting my kids down, every 4 or 5 videos there was an Instagram ad, and there was an Instagram ad starring like a major TikToker too. Like so clearly, Meta is like trying to get more eyeballs onto the fact that hey, we're just like you. except Instagram creators use slightly more polished production and stuff like that. Anyway, there's going to be a lot happening here. Semi related to like crazy company stupidity. Last week, XAI, Elon Musk's AI company, purchased X, the formerly known as Twitter. Doesn't mean much except he can use the funding from XAI to kind of absorb the losses of Twitter, and also like the story was like, oh yeah, it really values Twitter a lot more now.
No,
It's
it
actually a
doesn't.
way to save Twitter.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's a
No.
go on, Sam.
I was gonna say, if people remember when Elon bought Twitter, he a big part of like his purchasing power was that he kind of leveraged his existing Tesla stock.
Hmm.
Now, as anyone has seen recently, Tesla stock is not doing exactly all that well, and so that kind of puts him at risk to get I'm not sure I am not a stock analyst, like kind of margin
You're also
called
not an
on.
economist today.
Yes.
Hmm.
But it kind of puts him at higher risk because he is now leveraged kind of up to his eyeballs. But by selling, the debt of X along with everything else to XAI, he kind of shifts the liability, or the financial liability at least, over to XAI,
AI. Yeah.
and that is kind of like a weird shell game that he's playing, and it's kind of kind of a little squirrely. But
This
that's
is
that,
fun.
as far
Yeah.
as I can tell, that's the main goal of it.
This is
For
not the
normal
first time he's
people,
like over leveraged his companies too. Like Tesla, for many years before it was super successful, was like on the brink of death, and he had to do financial shenanigans to keep it afloat. Go ahead, Ben.
for many normal people, eventually the music would stop, and this is the sort of
Yeah.
situation where like a real estate investor or something ends up flinging himself off of one of his buildings. For some reason, I just think that that's not going to happen for Elon.
I mean, well, so it's been government contracts. It's been government money that's kind of come in, swooped him, and saved him. So again and again, that's the whole thing. We got to wrap on news. We got to keep moving. So just following up on Signalgate from last week. Hey, it was revealed this week that the National Security Council, including advisor Michael Waltz, who was the one who invited that journalist to the Signal chat for war plans, they've been using Gmail, normal Gmail, to conduct government business. So that's fun. Normal, not decently like secure for normal users, secure for consumers, but not super secure for government contracts. That's hilarious. I'm sure we're going to hear more and more about how these folks work. Let's move on to what we're working on. Anything you want to shout out, Sam?
Yeah. I'm working on some phone reviews. Can't say what it
Okay.
is, but you
So
might be
am
able
I.
to guess. I also got the chance to drive around the Gen 2 Rivian R1S. So I'm working
Nice.
on a review for that, probably maybe next week or the week after. And still kind of playing around with the ROG Z Flow 13. Although, of course, as Nintendo came and reared its head, so obviously that kind of took priority at least this
Took over all of our lives. I'll tell you, when I was driving I tested the Rivian R1S, the first gen, I
week.
think last year here in Atlanta. And I was driving around to return it because they have like a home base, like a
Yep.
warehouse in Atlanta. And I was stuck in traffic, as you are in Atlanta, and people just kept driving by me and staring at the car. And like one lady, like a soccer mom, just shouted out, "Is that a freaking Rivian in Atlanta?" So even
The headlights are like very eye catching. Like there's nothing else that looks like them on the road.
They look friendlier than any other car on the
they
road,
look
except for
adorable.
maybe a Mazda Miata.
Mm. They look adorable, and also the R3, the R3X, like that little cutie. Every time I see a video of that, I'm
E-
like,
everyone is waiting for that thing to come out. There's yeah, absolutely.
yeah. But hey, now we can dream about expensive cars. Everything's gonna get more expensive because there are additional tariffs being applied against cars, against EVs, against steel. Oh, that's going to be fun times over the next few years, folks. Yeah, let's move on to our pop culture picks for the week. I want to quickly shout out a couple of things. I reviewed a Minecraft movie for the site. I actually kind of liked it. I saw it in a press screening with my daughter and a whole bunch of kids and some fans too. They seem to love it. It is a Jared Hess movie. It in some ways feels like a pseudo sequel to Napoleon Dynamite because there's some of that weird indie comedy in there too. I did not mind it. I also reviewed Lazarus and saw the first 5 episodes of it. This is Shinichiro Watanabe's new series that's going to be premiering soon on Adult Swim this weekend. We'll have the interview with him later this episode. I think it's a really fun show. It's really good looking. The premise is cool. It's about a scientist who basically it's like, I've been trying to warn you guys about climate change. Nobody's listening. Here's a miracle drug. Take this miracle drug. Erase this pain for everybody. Then he comes back 3 years later and he's like, oh, by the way, it'll kill you all. This was actually a Trojan horse to just like kill humanity, maybe save the world a little bit. Um, the idea of a disaffected scientist just like really losing it. It reminds me of when we talked to Bill Nye and he was just so angry.
Yeah.
Sherlin wrote a post like saying Bill Nye's pissed, and I totally understand because we're looking at a future where we are doing nothing to prepare for the climate catastrophe. Meanwhile, the people in charge of governments are like, let's tank the economy for fun. Things are real bad. So the timing of Lazarus is kind of timely, I guess. The show itself feels a lot like Cowboy Bebop Redux.
I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah.
I love Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo, and
It's
so like
very much Cowboy Bebop the thing. Like I think maybe that works against it because you kind of have a similar core team, including the cool guy, the cool action guy, the femme fatale, the hacker teenager. Like it's also very similar. It's just a little updated because Bebop used like classical jazz and it was like a more somber, slow, emotional show.
and
This
it's
feels
also
like
just
young.
hard to top Bebop, right? And
It's
so
hard
it's
to top
like
Bebop.
when you're doing something so similar, you're gonna get that those weird
Yeah.
comparisons that like probably aren't exactly the most
No,
favorable
it's
all the
definitely
time.
yeah. It's definitely purposeful. Like even the opening feels like the Bebop, like the way they arrange the images and everything. And what Tanabe has said before is like, I put all my like ideas, I put everything I had into Cowboy Bebop, right? So everything that comes after is just like what I can like eke out of myself creatively. But anyway, the show is a lot of fun. The music is great. The opening is by Kamasi Washington, and it is fantastic. So the music is good. The vibes are good. It's fun to watch. It's just, it's not nearly as good as Cowboy Bebop, but what is? And also want to shout out, hey, watch Common Side Effects. We've talked about it before. That's the new show on Max. Also about a thing that could heal almost anything. This is like really in the zeitgeist right now. And it's really about how the pharmaceutical industry and the government would arrive. Like if a mushroom could cure anything, potentially death, but potentially like massive industries, would that be a good thing for humanity? Would that be a good thing for the pharmaceutical industry? What would happen? It's a really fun, quirky show, and honestly, I think I like it better than Lazarus because it's more inventive and there is some action there and like cool animation. So, anyway, check that out. Sam, anything you want to mention?
Yeah, I've just been watching Daredevil on Disney Plus, and like
Daredevil Reborn, right?
yes, and it's kind of everything. I was, I was bummed when they kind of canceled it when it was
Mhm.
over on Netflix, and so it's like it's just really nice to have like you know revisiting Daredevil, and they didn't do like we're gonna do a full reboot and we're gonna like tell the origin story again.
Mhm.
They kept the story going, and I think that's what I'm appreciating about. And they're really giving like Wilson Fisk the chance to like, hey, dude is like really kingpinning it up this season, and so yeah, I'm having a lot of fun
Last
with
I
that.
recall, he died, but comics are, comic stuff is gonna comic, I guess. Yeah. That's cool. I need to check that out, Sam. I have not had a chance to touch that yet because I've been watching all these other shows, like catching up on Severance, by the way, too. If you haven't done
Hmm.
that, do that. But yeah, I think that's a wrap for this week, folks. Do you want to read the finale, Ben?
Yeah, I'll do the outro. So, chat, we'll stick around for just a little bit, but we do have to get back to all of the other stuff that we do for work here. So, stick around for just a second, though. So, that's it for the episode. Our theme music is by game composer Dale North. Our outro music is by our former managing editor, Terrence O'Brien. The podcast is produced by me, Ben Elman. You can find Sam online at
At Sam Rutherford on X, unfortunately. I'm gonna move to Blue Sky one of these days. I
I see
promise.
your username there. I'm tagging it,
Yeah,
Sam.
yeah. No, I'm there. I just gotta start. Social media makes me tired.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear
You
you.
can definitely find Devindra on Blue Sky and where else?
At Devindra, pretty much everywhere. Mastodon too, but I also podcast about movies and TV at the Filmcast at thefilmcast.com.
Tell me what shows about everlasting life and miracle drugs I should watch next at heybellman.bluesky.social. Email us. Okay. Email us at podcast@engadget.com. Leave us a review on iTunes because, as the producer, I can tell you that actually does help. And listen on anything that gets podcasts. That includes Spotify.
Thanks, folks. And yes, stay tuned for my chat with Shinichiro Watanabe. That was such a momentous interview for me, just personally, because he is such a cool dude. Let me set the scene. We set up for the interview. He's just sitting there in front of his iPhone in speaker mode, 1,000 records behind him, his entire album collection behind him in his shades, just chilling. He's not like stressing this. He's just like cool dude as always. And I think we had a great conversation about Lazarus and also about like his how he thinks of music, how he kind of put it together, and what he is thinking about. I did also a little bit about the future of humanity too. So I think it's a really fun chat. Check it out. Here's Shinichiro Watanabe.
Okay, that's fantastic that you
Yeah.
had the cue right there. Um, I know the absolute bare minimum that you can pick up about Japanese culture via
Mhm.
anime, but you called him Watanabe-san when he deserves Sama.
You don't do that. You don't do that.
Really? Why
You
not?
don't do that. Not in professional settings.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know
The
that.
whole thing. And
See,
the
like
whole
I
thing
said,
I
I didn't know.
Japan is like very strict about the honorifics, and
yes.
it's like if you don't have the right relationship, then you just
Yes, it
don't fucking
depends
do it.
on the relationship. So, as an English speaker, I actually shouldn't even say son. Like, I kind of did it out of habit. But
Mm.
there's a lot of etiquette in terms of how they do that and how a Japanese speaker will ask you to do that. Anyway, the whole thing. I looked into it, Ben. I thought
Oh,
about
so
it.
so
I
fun
thought,
fact, I think there's like
yeah,
a specific honorific that you only use when you're talking to the emperor in Japanese, which is
yes,
just like a crazy like foreign concept as like English speakers,
yes. The
but also
whole
pretty
thing.
cool.
The whole
Well,
thing
I mean,
has to
what's the
happen.
difference between that and like my liege or something, you know?
It's
It's
just a
it,
different word because it's like
yeah.
levels of importance.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
English speakers never use my liege now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think the Elon Musk fans are definitely that's what they sound like when they talk about him on Twitter. They're like, good job."
We spent so long this episode talking about stuff that wasn't related to politics. It was so nice, but
Nice.
then it just reels us back in.
I know. But
Because
give us all
everything,
the distractions. Everyone needs distractions now.
unfortunately, everything is politics. But yeah, I see chat. People are saying the new Looney Tunes movie. Yes, the
Oh yeah, Ketchup
that one
Entertainment reeled it in.
that is very cool. Coyote versus Acme. Yes.
Although I would be really surprised if they like completely shelved that movie.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of makes sense that was it like a Batgirl movie that also got shelved when it was
That got
completely
completely
finished?
shelved. Yes.
That's part of, I think, a bigger, more rigid, like bunch of IP,
Mm-hmm.
and like DC might have had some say in it also. Versus like, why not have another Looney Tunes movie if it's already like finished and good? So I was still like pretty convinced that we were going to end up seeing Coyote versus Acme somehow. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
still really happy that it's going to end up being in theaters. I might
Yeah.
not have
Mm-hmm.
tried to see it in theaters if it weren't for this other stuff that happened.
Yeah.
Don't make that a marketing strategy though.
Shout out to Ketchup Entertainment. Unfortunately, a lot of the things they bought, including the day the Earth blew up, like the other Looney Tunes things, they have not made much money in theaters. Like this is a company that is out there like buying and setting up really cool projects, but they have not been super successful. I hope this one works out for them. 50 million is a lot for a single animated movie. You know. All right, how is chat doing, folks? I'm sure you've all got a lot of thoughts.
I think Mark Dell. I love that idea for sure. I've kind of wanted to make like custom Engadget shirts for a little while now. But it's like a very much side project, and I think I would need some sort of like corporate okay.
I think you can do
But
whatever you want. It's just like it's not an official. It's not an official thing. It's not an official shirt. What we need is more like unofficial fan gear. That would be great. Ugh.
yeah. Also, one fun thing about Daredevil is that they were I don't know if it's like necessarily taking shots, but one of the recent episodes they were kind of pumping up Jersey City a little bit. So as I was very excited to see that.
That's kind of cool. I did. I last year I came into the first time I stayed in Jersey City for one of our things. I think the Dell previews, and it was really cool, really chill place. But I'm like when I'm looking at places like I got to look at schools. So where are the good schools, unfortunately, and that is making life hard. But yeah, thank you for joining us, chat. It's
Tom
good.
Rogers says, "Why does it look like Ben is drinking vodka this morning?" I am drinking just water. It's water in a clear glass. I have heard something about how you can drink a straight spirit, and that might, capital might, help you like avoid food poisoning, but that could
Right
just
after
be
the show,
a
after the
old
podcast.
wives' tale.
No.
Yeah, it would be after the show because we rarely ever finish. Actually, no, we actually usually finish afternoon. It's
Yeah,
5 o'clock
me too.
somewhere.
5 o'clock somewhere. It could be like the French solution for when you have a cold. It's literally just a hot shot of whiskey, right? Like it's tea, but
Yeah.
a shot of whiskey in there, get you right
M-
and good.
Mark Dell says next you need another NAS stored offsite for remote backups. That is like always the plan that my
Yeah,
brother and I have had, which is like we both get like or not offsite storage. We both get NAS storage and then back each other up. He lives in Boston, so like that's a good distance away. Some terrible event can't take out both of our data at the same time.
the only
But
yeah
now
yeah
this
yeah.
stuff is going to get so expensive.
It's gonna be more expensive. And honestly, like yeah, if I had more like liquid funds, it would have been smarter to just like buy the NAS stuff because doing it will be more expensive in by the end of this year.
Yeah.
But also like I back up so much stuff to the cloud. Like honestly, I don't have a huge media library that I tap into, and when I do it off my computer, and it just doesn't need to be on all the time. So I
Mhm.
plex from this computer. I'm ripping 4K Blu-rays for backups and stuff, and it's also how I test out encoding on CPUs, and I can do that because I have a lot of storage here, but I don't have it backed up. That's the only downside there. My important data is already backed up to the cloud, so I don't feel like the NAS was super necessary. It's gonna happen eventually.
Dude named Charlie says, "I'm late. How was the Switch 2 in Mario Kart?" Let me
Good.
say, good and also good. Go back to the part in the stream where we talk about it or listen to the podcast.
Also,
If you're still watching, just download the podcast too. Help us with
also,
the numbers.
Absolutely.
Sherlyn just slacked me and said to say hi to everyone on the podcast. She's sorry she couldn't make it, but she there's a lot going on this week.
There's a lot going on. Yeah, Sherlyn, who apparently didn't know a GameCube, that what the GameCube was. I will remember that, Sherlyn. That
I
really
used
hit
to I
me
used to
pretty
joke with
hard.
Sherlyn all the time. She's like, "Oh, my favorite game is Mario Quest," because she couldn't tell the difference between Mario and like any other game. But yeah,
That's totally true. Mark Dell's asking, where do I back up to? Honestly, I've had OneDrive for a while. Like I've had a Microsoft 365 account, and that gives you a terabyte of storage. And like that's been enough. And my whole family get because I share the family plan. Everybody gets 1 terabyte. So that's been enough, but now I need more terabytes, unfortunately. So we're gonna figure it out, folks. But I think that's
Declan's
it, folks. Yeah.
Yeah, Declan says, my granddad used to say whiskey was a cure for everything. Have a cold? Whiskey. Broke your leg? Whiskey. Baby teething? Whiskey. I've heard about the baby teething thing, but the rest of it is, was your grandpa okay?
I mean, was anybody okay in the older gen?
Oh, yeah.
Grandpa, yeah.
Was, yeah.
Was
Okay,
anybody okay?
so thank you everybody for watching. Camera switching by me, OBS by Devindra, wonderful co-hosting by Sam. Uh,
I'm here for the vibes,
again,
baby.
yeah, if you watched it the whole way through, download us on other platforms, tell a few friends about us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, folks. We're out.